Hey guys, my name is LocoDoco, the better looking host of Listen Loco, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
The arrival of franchising to the European League of Legends region has not only meant that the formerly EU LCS has now been rebranded as LEC, League of Legends European Championship, but as well as having franchising as the system and teams buying in, the LEC playoffs have been completely rehauled in terms of format, both from the past of what used to be the ULCS and some of the changes over the years there, and from what is currently going on in North America in the LCS, as it is now rebranded from the NALCS. So whereas in North America they retain the same playout format that they had as last year, the format in Europe is, as you can see on the screen here, here's the graphic from Gamepedia. I'll make it a bit bigger so people can see. And basically the change is this. So as was the case in the past, 6 teams make the playoffs. First round is what used to be the quarterfinals in the past, even though obviously it was technically the round of 6. There weren't actually 8 teams because 2 teams got a bye, but whatever you say they had a bye, then it's like having a round of 8. So it's similar scenario for the first round because the top 2 teams receive a bye, except unlike in the past where they both received a bye into the semi-finals, and then in the semi-finals they played a team that won a quarterfinal / round of 6 match. Now you can see on this graphic here, the 2 teams that finish first and second in the split just skip right to what is here called round 3, but it's the one that doesn't have any matches leading into it. So they're just both sat up there, and for now, forget about them. So go to round 1. This is where teams 3, 4, 5, and 6 are going to play and against each other. So the way it's decided is the 3rd seed, so the best seed of all the teams playing in round 1, gets to pick which of the other teams of the last 2, 5 and 6, they want to play. They essentially get to pick. It could be the weaker team, could be the stronger team, could just happen to be a team they want to play for personal reasons. They want to avoid a team or they want to specifically punish a team. Whatever way, the 3rd seed picks their opponent out of 5 or 6. Whoever they pick, if they pick 5, then the 4th seed plays the 6th seed. If they pick 6, then the 4th seed plays the 5th seed. And that's the other matchup. The winner of that game, you can see there on the graphic, connects into round 2 and they play there. And they're going to decide which of these teams is going to go out in. At this point, this would be 4th place. You decide who comes 4th place here. The winner of that match then goes to round 3. But wait, now I have to skip back. Remember those 2 teams that got seeded with a bye, 1st and 2nd? They actually play each other in this match at the top of round 3. And the winner of that match goes into the final, like you would with the semi-final. The loser of that match, though, drops down into the bracket everyone else was playing in and plays the winner of round 2. So they play, like, obviously we've just decided the team that's 4th place. There's 3 teams left. 2 of them are in the lower bracket. That's what the round 3 matchup is. It's the loser of the seeds match against the winner of the rest of the bracket. Winner of that goes into the final and plays the team that won the seeds match, the one that had the bye. They play them in the final. So obviously, an interesting detail of this is it is entirely possible a team that skips to the round 3 match from having a top 2 seed could lose to the other top seed there, win the lower bracket match, and then have a rematch in the final of the same game they played, essentially in the upper bracket final in this particular sense. Because basically, this bracket is like a double elimination tournament in which the top 2 seeds are the only ones who have double elim, 2 lives, and the teams that start 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th start with 1 life in what for them is a single elim bracket, but it's basically like the losers bracket of this playoff. Now, if that sounds complicated, it's actually kind of a simpler format, smaller version of what they do in the International and Dota 2, where teams that do very well in the group start in the upper bracket of the tournament, and the teams that did the worst start in the lower bracket with just 1 life. Now, it's not entirely true that you get 2 lives if you start in the upper bracket, because obviously it is possible that one of the teams in round 3 could win their match. They got a seed, a bye, straight into round 3. They win their match there, go to the final, lose to either the team they beat in the previous match or a team coming from the other bracket, and they will have lost and come second in the tournament and only lost once in the entire tournament. So essentially for the top 2 teams, it's kind of like double elimination, but it's double elimination in the more modern twist where you don't still play a best of 3 of best of 3s in the final, or best of 5, to make the tournament lives equal. You say, right, well, we don't like that format because people don't tend to like that about double elimination. The final's just a straight up match. We forget about tournament lives at that point in time. So let's talk about all these different elements. So first of all, some of the factors that they've retained. So they kept the bye system, where if you're a top 2 seed, you skip to, in this case, top 3 in the tournament. In the past, it used to be top 4 because you made the semis. I'm not a fan of that generally. Even though on one level, I like the idea you reward teams for regular season excellence, as I have often pointed out, I would prefer to reward those teams by giving them prize money in the regular split, by giving them a trophy if they win the regular split, something comparable to, whatever it's called, the President's Cup in hockey, that type of an award. Actually making them skip a round of the playoffs, I don't like, because if they really are the best team in the region or the best team in the world, I want to see them play a bunch of games on their campaign towards winning the championship. If they win the championship, but they only won the bye match and the final, which is now possible, same as you could have won the semis and the final in the past, that's not many matches to watch, actually. Like, I want to see them play a quarterfinal and thrash a crap team, then play a semi-final, then play a final. I get a minimum of 3 series that way. This way, I can get a minimum of 2. Not as big a fan of that, but whatever. Admittedly, I do think this compromise is not a bad one, because one of those teams that gets a bye is actually still going to potentially play an extra game if they make the final, because then they would end up having played 3 series as opposed to just a semi and a final. Now, admittedly, if they just lose the lower bracket game, they still played just the 2 games. But whatever, to be fair, one of the teams coming from the lower bracket then gets the extra series. Because remember, if they win the league, or lose even, will have played 4 series if they come all the way from the lower bracket and go to the final, instead of just 3. So it's an interesting compromise, I'll give them that. It's slightly different. As a purist, I'm not as big a fan, but I see what they're going with, what they're trying to incentivize and encourage, keep teams on track of having different tiers of where you're at, always have something to play for, because getting that seed could mean an extra tournament life, it could mean a chance to play a team and then figure out how they play and have a chance to beat them the second time you play them if you wouldn't beat them the first time. So I can get on board somewhat with this compromise. The idea of number 1 and number 2 playing is very unusual. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, except, as I say, double elimination tournaments like the International. So in a way, it's kind of cool, because on the one hand, if they end up meeting in the final again, you've got a great narrative. Hey, we already beat these guys once. What can they do this time? Or can they overcome that and learn from that? I like the adaptation element. That's why I've actually said in the past I wanted double elim, because I actually think from watching Dota and watching League of Legends, where League of Legends is almost universally single elim, and Dota historically has been largely double elimination. I've made this point many times. There are a number of great teams in history who were famous for being able to come back from the lower bracket and win the tournament. And part of the reason why is when they play the first time in the upper bracket, they can adapt from that, learn things, test things out, and maybe they figure out the solution to beating you when they play you again in perhaps the final if they come from the lower bracket, or when you drop to the lower bracket. I actually find that to be, for someone who enjoys strategic play, tactical play, like game planning for someone, I find that actually to be a superior format. I can understand why some people don't like it as much. They just want their teams to play once, but I personally actually prefer that system. So I like the positives that this brings. The fact that you're going to, no matter what, get number 1 and number 2 seed play, and then if they meet in the final, cool. If they don't, hey, at least we've got to see them play anyway. I kind of like that to some degree. It is a bit weird that one of them has to have a tournament loss no matter what. I mean, they obviously would have it anyway in a final. Remember, if you have a double elim bracket, the upper bracket final basically used to be the final of a single elim tournament, but it's like you added more matches, a lower bracket and another final, to kind of error correct and see whether that really was the best team. Now, you can have your debates and say, well, is winning 2 out of 2 matches proof that you're the best, or is going 1-1? Yeah, there's that whole thing you can do there. But generally, I think it is a better format overall. I'd edge with it. I will say there are a couple of obvious problems in terms of narrative, which is, on the one hand, if you end up winning both matches that you play, the seed match and the bye match, and then you also meet them in the final and win against them, yes, it will look even more conclusive. Like, you were the best team. No one can fuck with you. The team that comes second can't really make many excuses. You beat them twice. The problem is, similarly, if you lose both times, you can't complain. What happens, though, when you go 1-1? Like, to me, it's not a problem. Okay, you won the upper bracket final, but I adapted. I beat someone in the lower bracket. I met you in the final. I beat you in the final. If anything, right, you've just seen me play extra matches. You've beaten me already. I've had to play more games. I haven't had as much time off to scout. You have all these advantages, right? If I beat you there, in my opinion, we don't have to play a rubber match. Like, I win the tournament. It doesn't matter that I went 1-1 against you. But I know for a lot of people, they get really caught caught up in that flaw. I consider it a logical flaw, personally, like a fallacy. The idea that, like, well, how can we say that you've won the tournament when I'm 1-1 in series with you? I beat you once first, and then you beat me once the second time. Yeah, but you're not playing against one team. You're playing against the whole tournament field. And so the reason why I say I think it's a flaw is because no one has this problem, seemingly, when it's a GSL-style group. But that's a small double limb bracket. You can beat someone the first time you play them, then play them in the decider match for second place and lose, and you're out, and it's 1-1 between the two of you. No one has a problem there. Similarly, if I played you in the group stage of a tournament and beat you in, let's say we had best of threes there, and then I played you in a best of three, let's just imagine, in a double limb bracket for third place, if I beat you third place there, do you go, yeah, but it was 1-1 from the group, so we should play again? No, you understand that tournament lives still worked out for the overall field. Against the field, I beat you, but someone else beat, this all makes sense. So I don't think it's that big a deal, but I will say it's a problem that a lot of people get caught up on. So I could see some people complain about that part already. I will add in, on the one hand, for compromise purposes, like the logistics of making a tournament run and the fact that it tends to be what allows double a limb to ever be run, I am willing to accept the compromise of not having true tournament lives. As in, the team that win the bye match, the 1 or 2 seed that wins the match between the two of them and goes to the final. As I've said, if they lose the final, they come second place, despite the fact they actually are now on the same number of tournament lives as everyone else. They've lost once, and everyone else gets to continue with that tournament life. They don't. But while the purist in me says, no, you should have that tournament life. You should have to play, if the second place team or the team that comes to the lower bracket wins the final, technically, as a purist, they should have to play another final and win that. And if you win the match, you win the tournament. If they win that one, they win the tournament. The idea they win just for winning the final, yeah, it's a bit imperfect. You can certainly argue against it. But as I say, that's only as a purist. If I do look at the fact that it's not as though you lose all your advantage by winning that match. No, like the team that goes to the low bracket has to play an extra series. There's a chance to get eliminated. They get punished in that sense. You can watch them play that series while they don't have an extra series of you playing. You're in the final already to scout from. In theory, you might actually be able to get more preparation, because you could start prepping for both teams. They have to play a team right in front of them right now, and they get their prep time massively cut down. There are still enough advantages I don't mind it, and I would prefer it over single limb, which is the key aspect. If people aren't going to run double limb, and this is why they didn't run double limb for many years in other games, because they didn't want to have to run 2 finals potentially, and then have people argue like, oh, but it's just not as interesting when the guy in the final only has to win 1 series and the other one has to win 2 series. Then you have winner bracket advantages, like giving picks away to people. I don't mind that personally, but some people will say it changes the game. It's not the same as a straight up game. Okay, I get all these elements, but in as much as I like some double limb components, I'm willing to accept this. I think it's better than what we had before. Now, in terms of selection remaining, in this particular case, it's not the semi-finals opponents picking. It's the third seed picking who he wants to play. I like that. I'm a big fan of it. Again, as a purist, it's not good because now, in theory, you can pick a weaker opponent, even though someone like, if I'm like put it this way, if I was the 5th seed and I actually ended up a couple of games ahead of the 6th seed and I played better, and then someone picks me just to fuck with me because they think I'm worse, I would feel hard done by. Like, well, I earned that 5th seed and it gets taken away from me and I get treated like the 6th seed. That's not fair. But what I do like about this aspect is it does make the narrative aspect sexier. Like now you can either pick someone because you think they're weaker even though they're placed higher. Ooh, what? He thinks he's actually not as good as his record. Or you pick someone because you want to beat them even though they're the better team and purposely put them out in the first round. That's kind of a cool storyline. Or you want to pick them just because your team stylistically matches up better even though they're actually a better team as the 5th seed than the 6th seed, for example. I think that's kind of cool in its own way. I think it makes the narrative around the tournament better, makes it a lot easier to follow. So in a world in which the big problem in esports is getting the viewer numbers up there, getting fan engagement, I'm willing to make a compromise there for the sake of making the tournament better. Like I've often joked that if you want to make the most hype playoffs of all time, just let me pick the bracket. Let me decide who's first and second seed, who's third and 14th. Don't go off regular season because I'll make the most fire matchups you've ever seen. The rivals playing each other, the team that never beats someone having to play the team they always lose to. Let's see that matchup again. I would make some crazy great matchups But obviously, it wouldn't be the best pure competition. There was a lot of competitive integrity. So this is kind of a bit of a compromise between the two. And as I always allude to, they're taking cues here from what they used to do in the MSL group stage selection in StarCraft Brood War in sort of like the latter part of the 2000s, where you could pick people in your group based on your seed, and therefore, as I'm saying, create rivalries, revenge matches, easier groups, harder groups. You could do whatever you wanted, but there's a reason as to why you picked that, and that becomes part of the fun meta-contextually in itself. I will point out, just eliminating having a third place game, where there is one, but you're still in the tournament at this point in time, is great. Because third place games in single elim tournaments suck. You can't win the tournament anymore. And so even though you know you win more prize money or you get more circuit points, so this might matter to get us to Worlds, you can't make yourself subconsciously think about that and focus. The real reason to play was still to try and be a champion and win the tournament. So once you know you're out of the tournament, it's not only famous that a lot of very good teams will fuck around in the third place match and lose to a lesser team, but they just can't be as focused in the game. It's so tough, or at least most people won't be able to do it. So I like that you eliminate that and you still incentivize people, hey, you can still win the tournament, battle for it. So I think that is much better. I'll also point out that this does, in theory, because number 1 and number 2 seed play each other definitely, and then one of the winner of that match plays potentially the same opponent or a different opponent who's proven to be better in the rest of the tournament, that actually should make the LEC have a stronger, more battle-tested MSI candidate than the LCS. Because in LCS, it's still just a single elim bracket with the buys picking who they want to play, and that's how they're going to do it in terms of the selection component. So actually, in theory, the EU team should be more clearly the number 1 EU team than the LCS team that represents LCS is at MSI. Let's see if that ends up being the case, but that's certainly an interesting side detail because it's a sturdier format in my opinion. I'll also add in, it's interesting to me the way that Riot have historically used EU as kind of the laboratory, the experimental ground of testing stuff out. Like, they had best of 2s first, they messed with a bunch of things first. Interestingly, LCS did get selection first, as opposed to in EU, it just had the reseeding. LCS got where you could actually pick who you wanted, so they didn't always use EU first for the experimental aspect there, but generally they have with these formats, and I would suggest that's what they're doing now. That if this works out well in LEC, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is the European Riot offers getting their own choice in the format, which is cool, but I think if this turns out to be a very good format, eventually you'll see it transfer over and LCS will do it as well. But again, by having the two formats and in two different markets, you can test it out, and maybe it turns out that as a market, NA prefers single elim and they want the old school method. Maybe LEC likes the newer approach, and maybe this is in line with certain aspects of European sports that they're thinking tie in here. I'm not sure, but I actually do like the idea of testing a format out before just ramming it down everyone's throats entirely. So generally, I think these are good changes. I actually like the changes overall. The only real downsides are things that aren't downsides in the context of what we had before. They're all still upgrades. They're only generally, I would say, downsides in terms of what might be the most perfect, idealized format you could have. And even then, for compromised logistical reasons, I don't know that I necessarily would personally pick those for League of Legends anyway. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, James Harding, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, Tristan Jones, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for upcoming content of mine? Perhaps you'd like to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA. Do you want some teasers to see who the next guests are for my talk shows, for my interviews? Maybe you'd like to take part in a monthly esports discussion with yours truly. Well, put your money where your mouth is at the Patreon link in the description box below and join the Scrilluminati today.